Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we do a deep dive into the greatest vampire movies of all time. And let's get to the list. Afflicted is a 2013 Canadian found footage horror movie, written, directed, and starring Derek Lee and Cliff Prowse in their feature film debut. The story's about two best friends who see their trip of a lifetime take a dark turn. Now in a foreign land, they race to discover the source before it consumes him completely.
Oh my God, Derek.
This is such a brilliant, refreshing movie because I've been a fan of vampire movies my whole life, pretty much, at least ever since I started watching horror movies. But this is very unique. It's very different. And even though it is found footage, and we've seen a lot of other found footage movies, the way this is done and the way that it interweaves the vampire mythos into this found footage type of scenario is so well done. The special effects are subtle and so well executed that it just absolutely feels real. And the chemistry with this cast just feels very organic. They feel like real best friends on this journey, and that just adds another layer of complexity and makes it that much more compelling. I absolutely love this movie and definitely think it deserves to be considered one of the best vampire movies ever made. Fright Night is a 1985 supernatural horror comedy. Written and directed by Tom Holland, it stars Chris Sarandon, William Ragsdale, Amanda Bearse, and Roddy McDowall. The story follows young Charlie Brewster, who discovers that his next-door neighbor is a vampire.
Now, we wouldn't want to wake your mother, would we, Charlie? Then I'd have to kill her, too. Right up!
This is such a fun movie. It's one of my favorite 1980s horror movies ever. And it's very much a comedy as well. There's definitely a lot of humor throughout, but it has plenty of horror moments and just very iconic scenes, really enjoyable characters. It's really full of that preteen teenager adventure type of vibe to it as well that really made me buy in, especially from a young age, because it's the kind of movie that just makes your imagination run wild and you picture yourself in all these scenarios, and it just makes for a lot of fun. I really enjoyed too how they tied in the whole horror host, the late night horror host, that's really kind of becoming a lost art now. But back then it was still very much a thing. You had USA Up All Night and you had all these different networks still doing this up late at night horror host on the weekends. This is a real 1980s classic and an absolutely iconic vampire movie.
Take her, Louis. End her suffering and yours. For do not doubt, you are a killer.
I want some more.
Interview with the Vampire.
Interview with the Vampire is a 1994 gothic horror movie, directed by Neil Jordan and based on Anne Rice's 1976 novel of the same name. It stars Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, and Kirsten Dunst. The plot's about a vampire who tells his life story: love, betrayal, loneliness, and hunger.
I'll tell you my story. I'll tell you all of it.
Gee, how?
I'm flesh and blood, but not human. I haven't been human for 200 years.
I'll never forget seeing this in theaters for the first time because it was just such an epic journey and adventure and refreshing and unique. It really takes this dramatic mood and atmosphere and puts it on display because this movie just has so much style to it. That for me is what always has stuck with me about this movie, is just its overall energy and just the way that it unfolds. I've always really enjoyed biopics, movies that just kind of tell someone's entire life story. And to see that through the eyes of a vampire, I just find that so fascinating. And it's so well performed too. This cast is just absolutely iconic, just brilliant. And as much as this movie does have like this romantic flash and flair and sensibility, it still leans into the horror at times. There's some very intense, creepy as hell scenes, but everything is so well put together and constructed, and you could just really see the attention to detail in this movie. The journey that this movie takes you on is absolutely epic, and without a doubt, it is one of the best vampire movies ever made. Bram Stoker's Dracula is a 1992 gothic horror movie, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and is based on the 1897 Bram Stoker novel Dracula. It stars Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, and Anthony Hopkins. The centuries-old vampire, Count Dracula, comes to England to seduce his barrister Jonathan Harker's fiancée Mina and inflict havoc on the foreign land.
What are you?
It is amazing how well this movie has stood up, because it is over 30 years old now, and yet it still feels so fresh, so original, and absolutely iconic. It has some of the greatest visuals of any vampire movie for sure ever made. And Gary Oldman's performance is truly just magnificent, because he's both alluring and absolutely intimidating at the same time, and he just does that so well. And I'd argue that anyone has ever done a better job of portraying a vampire than Gary Oldman. Because yes, there's been so many different takes on vampires, and they're done in so many different ways, but I don't think anyone's done it better. Comparable, yes, maybe, but better, I don't think so. But just the cast in general in this movie is bar none. Everybody in this just gives it their all. It feels almost like a play more than even a movie. It's just breathtaking and epic, and just the visuals once again are just amazing in this. The practical effects, I just love the design. Everything about this movie is just gorgeous and amazingly done. Just technically speaking alone, this is one of the best, but it also has a fantastically written story and pacing. It's so well directed by Francis Ford Coppola. This movie is just an absolute treasure and one of the greatest movies ever made. Horror of Dracula is a 1958 gothic horror movie, released by Hammer Film Productions and directed by Terence Fisher. It's based on Bram Stoker's 1897 novel of the same name and stars Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Carol Marsh. Jonathan Harker takes a job at Count Dracula's castle while hiding his true intentions, but Harker is shocked to meet a woman who claims that she is a prisoner and begs for his help. But he unwisely puts her out of her misery and suffers the wrath of Count Dracula.
You must help me. You must. You're my only hope. You must.
I'll help you. I promise.
This list is amazing to make because it's one iconic, classic performance and movie after another, and Christopher Lee is no exception, because this guy truly was one of the greatest horror icons that ever lived. And his performance of Dracula was so unique, and it took it from this era where Dracula was not extremely intimidating and terrifying, and he really kind of leaned back into that and made him really scary. Yes, he's suave and has style, but absolutely terrifying at the same time. But you can't forget about Peter Cushing, who also gives an iconic performance in this as well. But just the look and atmosphere and style that Hammer films have, the way they're shot, the way blood looks, just their overall pacing and atmosphere is just so entertaining and very unique. They don't feel like any other movie. So there's no way in hell you could make a vampire list without including this gem on it.
I am Dracula.
Dracula is a 1931 pre-code supernatural horror movie, directed by John Browning with a screenplay by Garrett Fort, and is based on Bram Stoker's 1897 novel of the same name. It stars Bela Lugosi, Dwight Frye, and Edward von Sloan. The story's about Count Dracula, a vampire who immigrates from Transylvania to England and preys upon the blood of living victims.
What's he done to you, dearie? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened a vein in his arm, and he made me drink.
This movie and Bela Lugosi's performance are truly iconic, and they really are groundbreaking and pioneered what we know today as vampires. Because prior to this, there definitely wasn't really what we would think of as vampires. Because you did have Nosferatu, but that was a very scary, very different type of vampire. This was the Count. He was seductive and yet intimidating and scary. Because yes, we had seen the scary vampire, that side, but we hadn't seen the seductive, elegant, classy type of vampire yet. The one that would woo a woman and had that power, that way to like send those signals kind of thing and make them fall in love with him, make them turn their neck and be like, bite me, Dracula, you know, that kind of thing. And so this really kind of added that layer to it. And Bela Lugosi was so iconic to this day. You still hear people doing that funny little accent I'm not even going to try to attempt to do, but it's just, he is Count Dracula. Every time you see a Count Dracula, it's molded in some way, shape, or form after the Bela Lugosi Dracula. And I just love the black and white, the classicness that this movie has as well. I know that the classic black and white is not for everyone, I get it. But if you can take the time to slow your mind down and appreciate the classics, it really helps to inform why horror is the way it is today. It's the building blocks of what makes this genre so amazing. And this is what really popularized vampires. This is where we got so many of the different famous tropes. This movie really is groundbreaking. There are so many techniques and so many things that were pioneered in this film. I could go on and on and on about it, but I'm telling you, this movie is brilliant and definitely deserves to be on any vampire list. Blade is a 1998 superhero vampire horror movie, directed by Stephen Nerton and is based on Marvel Comics superhero of the same name. It stars Wesley Snipes, Stephen Dorff, and Chris Christopherson. In the film, Blade is a Dhampir, a human with vampire strengths but none of their weaknesses, who together with his mentor fight against vampires. This is such a badass, very unique movie, especially at the time. You had not seen anything to this point like this. And yet he's always fighting against it in order to achieve the ultimate good. He keeps that monster at bay, and the way they use that throughout the trilogy is really well done. But the gore is so amazing in this movie. Everything from the very beginning, it never stops. The action, the excitement, but yet it has plenty of horror elements as well. Also, the speed that this movie comes at you with, it's just so aggressive and violent. I love it. It's a blast. It just really is an absolutely entertaining, amazing movie. And for me personally, it's right near the top of my favorite vampire movies.
I am writing about the Marsden House.
And you'd like to visit? You'll enjoy Mr. Bram. Maybe he'll enjoy you.
Salem's Lot is a 1979 two-part horror movie miniseries, directed by Tobe Hooper and adapted from the 1975 Stephen King novel of the same name. It stars David Soul, James Mason, and Lance Kerwin. The plot's about a writer who returns to his hometown and discovers that the citizens are turning into vampires.
I'm writing about a house.
The house?
The Marsden House.
So in my opinion, this is the most underrated of any movie on this list and one of the most underrated horror movies ever made. Because for one, the story is a Stephen King story. For two, it's directed by Tobe Hooper. It has some of the most chilling, creepy practical effects ever done, and imagery is just stuff that sticks with you, stuff that I had nightmares when I was young with for days. And I know so many people who feel the same way about it as I do, but yet it's sadly just never talked about when you're talking about the best of any genre and any list of horror movies, and I think that is an absolute tragedy, crime. It's just not right. I think because unfortunately it was made as a two-part miniseries, they kind of stretched it out too long. So if you watch it and you watch the movie cut where it's cut down and it flows better and it's really more of a movie, it's really, really fantastic. But if you watch it in the two-part miniseries, unless you're a diehard like I am, there's some dead weight. There's at least 15-20 minutes that just feel like it drags. It feels like you just don't need any of that section. And so I think that's part of what's held it back. It just never had a lot of publicity either. It doesn't have any big names attached as far as actors, but the cast involved give it everything they've got. They're fantastic performances. I mean, I love this movie so much. This little guy sits on the set at all times, and it's basically Barlow. It is as close as I can find to a Barlow mask. This truly is a classic and absolutely deserves to be on any best of list. "30 Days of Night" is a 2007 horror movie, directed by David Slade and is based on the comic book miniseries of the same name. It stars Josh Hartnett, Melissa George, and Danny Houston. After a small Alaskan town is plunged into darkness for a month, it is attacked by a gang of bloodthirsty vampires. So a couple weeks ago, I did a recommendation list over on Hulu, I believe, recommending this movie, and I talked about it then. This is one of my favorite movies ever, but definitely when you're talking about vampires, because this brings back the mean, the vicious, the scary, the intimidating vampires on a whole different level, because they're scary and vicious and just absolutely savage in every way, because these vampires don't make any apologies. They just come at you at 1,000 miles an hour and rip you in half. This movie's cold and bleak, and it has this real savage quality to it. It's also full of action, and it's so exciting and intense. This truly is an amazing, exciting vampire movie that definitely deserves to be on this list.
You don't want to miss this.
You smell like garlic.
The Lost Boys is a 1987 supernatural horror movie, directed by Joel Schumacher with a screenplay by Jeffrey Boehm. It stars Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric, and Jamie Gertz. The story follows two brothers who, after moving to a new town, discover that the area is a haven for vampires.
Drink some of this, Michael.
Don't. It's blood.
Michael.
So this list wasn't really in any order. It's just 10 of the very best vampire movies in my opinion. And I'm probably gonna do a part 2 because there's 10 more that I think are just that iconic and deserve to get love as well. But if there really is any order to it, my number one vampire movie is The Lost Boys. Because this movie has everything that I love about vampire movies, and really horror for that matter. It gets violent, it gets brutal, but it's funny, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's full of action. It has some of the most cool, iconic, just absolutely amazing characters of any movie ever done. Because Kiefer Sutherland really epitomizes what a vampire is in this movie. He's cool, he's attractive, he's alluring, but yet he's also terrifying, scary, and not quite all there, not in a good way anyway, just definitely a streak of evil. But this movie is also fun and it's an adventure. There's so many iconic scenes. It's so well put together, directed, the pacing. It's one of those movies that is absolutely timeless. I rewatched it recently, and every time I've seen this movie, it just always blows my mind how well it holds up. Because this movie could come out today, and I still think it would be a big hit. It's just got all the things that make for a great movie. To me, it's one of those few movies that I consider to be an absolute 5-star perfect movie. So when I was putting together a list of vampire movies, there was one movie that there was no question was definitely going to be on it, and it's this one, because I think it is that good and that perfect for the vampire genre. So that's my list, but like I said, I'm probably going to do a part 2, because there's no way that I could just say 10 movies and sum up an entire genre of movies. But I'd love to hear down in the comments, what are your favorites? What are the ones that you think that I should have put that are not on here? Or what are the ones on here that you agree with and why? Because I recently did a werewolf list like this, and it's just really great how many of you guys have chimed in the comments, and we've just had this real back and forth about, you know, what our favorites are. And so I'd love to see that happen again with this. But that's gonna do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ding that little bell, because that's the best way to keep track of this channel. And when I post videos like this, and I post videos like this at least once every single week. I also want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys absolutely mean so much to me. And if you guys would like to find out how you can be a part of the crew over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or if you want to be a channel member over here, there's a little button down there that says join. But you got to be on a PC to see it. For some reason, that little button is not available on phones or tablets. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun! If you enjoyed this, click right here to see 10 of my favorite werewolf movies. And I'll see you guys next time!